up this morning, man, I was feeling bad. Whoa, babe, I was feeling bad. Well, I was thinking about the good time, Lord, I once have had. Well, Lord, oh, boy, she brought my breakfast this morning, and she didn't know my name. She didn't know my name. She said, give it to the long line skin of Hain. She said,
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening, blues people? What's going on? What's going on and what's happening with you? Welcome to another episode of Jack Dapper Blues. And this evening's show is from slave seculars to the blues, preserving and conserving Black American folklore. Now, we're going to go deep into this for several reasons. What slave seculars are, how they evolved, morphed, if you will, or birthed into the blues, how both blues and slave seculars, why you little, how they all come together and what that means for not only just Black American folklore, but Black folk narrative and everything else that goes along with it, right? Let me give you the definition of slave seculars, some concepts by great scholars and musicians and composers and the like. And then we'll connect it all back to the blues and then back to our people. I started with that song, and let me just first and foremost say that was an Alan Lomax recording of Levy Camp Holler. Most of you, like myself, know Levy Camp Holler when it comes to Sun House, right? But that was a different version of Levy Camp Holler, a version that I think is very imperative to the story. Why is it imperative to the story? We're going to get into that. But before we get into all of those things, remember, this is brought to you by Jack Dapper Blues Heritage Preservation Foundation, which that's my organization. And what we do is, as you can see, raise awareness of African American traditional music, folklore, folk life, material art, and the Black experience. We work to conserve our heritage while being a focal point of research and repository of folklore narratives of the so-called Black American, the Black Indigenous, the African American, and just melanated people on the Americas. The African American Folklorist magazine is a hybrid print and online publication of peer-reviewed and curated written and mixed media content on Black American cultural expression and folklore, whose main objective is to be a platform for Black Americans to own and contextualize our story on our terms. Black culture is and as it relates to Black folk. The organization distributes the magazine. By the end of the month, the latest print will be out, which is Black folk art, urban, Three Brothers urban art, folk art, With that, make sure you cop some of our merchandise. Okay. Along with the merchandise, before I get into it, make sure you become a Patreon member so that you can follow Jack Dapper Blues Reflexive Podcast. The Jack Dapper Blues Reflexive Podcast, where I discuss, if you're on Instagram, hopefully your comments would come here, okay, to my if you will, general comments, okay? But Jack Dapper Blues Reflexive Podcast, um, this is my journey in the discipline and in the field. Not even just my achievements, things I made mistakes, things I wish I did better, things I noticed later, along with preparations for approaching public folklore, academic ethnomusicology, and everything that goes along with it. Considering that I am lucky and blessed to produce and participate in public-facing programming that focuses around the blues people, our performance, our story, and everything. I like to say blues people rather than Black or African American, or because I think blues people defines all of that, all of the above, uh, particularly those of a Southern background, end of the migration. You can also check out Blues People Music and Folklore if you want us to bring that to your town, to your school, to your organization, to your library. It is a curriculum that is twofold, teaches you the basic fundamentals of making a blues song, as well as how to interview, document, record, and then it culminates in a public facing program where you get to share your work. Okay, so now that we did some house cleaning, it is time to get into it. Peace, 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 and peace. It is time to get into it. And today, this evening, we're talking about from slave seculars to the blues, preserving and conserving blues people, Black American folklore. Okay? So before we get to it, those of you that are with me right now, I'm going to ask you a question. It's yes or no. So in the chat, what I would like you to do in the comments, 1 for yes, 2 for no. How many of you are familiar with and or heard of slave seculars? 1 for yes, 2 for no. How many have any of you, have you heard of slave seculars? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Now, those of you that follow okay, ancestor, we're going to get into that this evening. Those of you that follows my group on Facebook, which I need to put that right here for you all. So if you're not following, you can follow, which is the that explains it. Black spirituals, field hollers, and slave seculars. Excuse me. I'm gonna drop the link in the chat. Okay, join. Follow there. Join there. Okay. Now, one of the reasons why I'm asking you to go there because I've pinned a breakdown of slave seculars, but we're going to go into it, and I'm going to put a couple of images up, as well as share some musics that relate to it. Again, this is not to be offensive. We're not to be divisive either, okay? So we're going to start with this image. And that's the image of chattel slavery, okay? Now, one of the books I speak about or reference or cite this evening, one of those books will be The Half Has Never Been Told. Again, those of you who have been following my work for some time know that I evoke that book often because it talks about the Coffle Gang. Now here, I'll be honest, this is I yapped this image off the internet, right? And it kind of looks like slaves in a chattel slavery in Africa. It could be in the Americas, but that's not really the issue, right? And the reason why my initial statement said, if you look in the back and you'll see how they're dressed, it doesn't necessarily reflect some of the things we know of when it comes to domestic, even international slavery, but on the Americas, right? It looks different. But that's not the issue. And that's not what we're talking about this evening. Hey, Don, Scott, what's happening, y'all? Good to see y'all. Good to see y'all. What we're talking about and why this image is necessary for this, because we're talking about slave seculars, okay? And now how slave seculars become blues and how slave seculars are a part of oral histories and how blues becomes oral history, which is what we spoke about last week, okay? But slave seculars, and I keep saying it because I want to drive that home for the simple fact that you understand where the concept, the idea, the expression comes from. So slave seculars, along with the spirituals, were the earliest forms of African American oral history through musical expression, vocal musical expression. In most cases, remember, the voice is the first instrument, okay? And I'll be going between images as we do this and have this conversation, all right? They preserved and conserved stories of resilience and collective memory, which remain central to the celebration of Black history today. Now, I asked, do you know what slave seculars are? That is a brief, that's not even a definition. It just kind of gives you context. I'm going to tell you what slave seculars are. Then I'll go through the different types of slave seculars. And then I'll give you some thoughts by scholars. You know what I'm saying? Peace, peace, peace. Happy that you're joining. What's good with you? What is good with you? So, the definition of slave seculars. Okay. Slave seculars are non-religious songs created and sung by enslaved, imprisoned Black Americans. They're distinct from spirituals and other, well, slightly sacred music. And when I say slightly sacred, because sound-wise, phrasing-wise, they're pretty much the same. But slave seculars were created specifically to be the antithesis of a particular religious ideology. Okay? So when it says distinct from spiritual or other sacred music, I want to be clear that there are some sacred musics of the indigenous of the indigenous of the Americas, and there's some sacred music of Africans who become American that slave seculars are not in contrast to. It was something specific that the slave secular was in contrast to, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll show this picture again. I think this is no. I'll come back to that too. Forgive me, you all. This is the picture I was looking for, and the reason why this is a picture because this picture defines what I'm explaining to you. Jan is the fiddler and Sam is the witch doctor, right? Now, it would not be out of the ordinary for Sam or Jan to be, well, for Jan to be playing a song and Sam possibly singing, or both of them singing, or one or the other, a slave secular, even though Sam is practicing a sacred practice. But do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so these secular songs serve various purposes, such as expressing personal feelings, providing rhythm for labor, conveying hidden messages of resistance, or offering moments of entertainment and relief from the brutal conditions of the enslavement. Again, we got to understand there are a few types of slave seculars, types of songs that fall under the guise of slave secular. But as we learn from James Cone, James H. Cone, the man in the middle, slave also, if I'm not mistaken, actually also Amiri Baraka, who I've spoken about on multiple occasions, as well as James Cone. The slave secular was, and I spoke about it last week, but it was created as a resistance to the missionaries that were pushing a version of Christianity that did not, that was not beneficial to the imprisoned. Okay. So if you remember last week when we spoke about the different folk beliefs of the Black indigenous, of the blues people, and hoodoo was part of it, Pentecost was part of it. There's also Christianity, Ibu, Hebrew, these things, right, were all practiced, right? Sam is the wise doctor, absolutely. These things were practiced, right? But if you remember what we discussed last week, you could be charged equivalent to murder, rape, arson if you were caught practicing these sacred beliefs. Okay? And mind you, you got to remember the AME Church, the African Methodist, I think Episcopal Church, that's what the acronym means. They too were against the folk belief practices of the blues people Southerners. So don't I don't want people to just think this is white and black. This is tribal. This is national. When I say nationality, this is class based. This is assimilation or the resistance to, right? So I bring that up again to say it is not that the imprisoned and the enslaved thought that Christianity or uh, Judaism or Pentecostal beliefs in the Most High, God Almighty. I don't want y'all to think that the blues people of that time didn't practice this. What I want you to understand is the missionaries that were coming to the plantations and the slave quarters to quote unquote civilize, and all these missionaries were not necessarily white. Again, we got to keep this in mind. Everything is not about color to that degree. But what I want you to understand is when they were coming, pushing this sort of doctrine, these Google idiots tried to lie and say that African slaves brought musical instruments with them on slaves instead of right. See, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. We'll definitely talk about that, right? But before we get to that, the response to the attempted indoctrination by the missionaries were slave seculars. So I used this example before when I spoke about NWA, and not just NWA, there's other rap groups, and there's not just rap, but other protest songs. Right? When you listen to protest songs, past and present, and you hear how they take, whether it's a popular song, whether it's a hymnal, and they change the words around to fit the moment of resistance. This is what the slave secular began as, but it also was work songs, right? It also was field hollers. It's also corn shucking and dance songs. And I spoke to y'all about corn shucking and, well, I didn't really speak about dance songs. It was also play and game songs. And again, protest and escape songs, right? So I want to give you guys a couple of examples. And one of the examples I want to give you is Elijah Cox, first and foremost.
I know it. Start at the beginning, Tom. All right, go ahead. I am thinking today, when the time has passed away, when the tide may go long and long ago. For every night and long, I'll pray for them that go, and those agonizing through every day. Why they took away my boy, who was his mother's joy. It made me from the cradle and we raised. For the bitter body part, and then they broke the old man's heart in those agonizing cruel slavery days. Though they never come again, there's a better praise to him. Look down where the little children play. For every night and morn we will pray for them that's gone in those agonizing cruel slavery days.
So the name of that song was The Agonizing Slavery Days. Now I'm going to ask you all a question. How many of y'all know who Elijah Cox is? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Please, yeah, definitely share the information with me, please. Definitely share the information with me, please. Okay, you're familiar with Elijah Cox. Who else is familiar with Elijah Cox? Because Elijah Cox is significant to this story on several fronts. So Elijah Cox was part of the WPA Writers Program. Now, we spoke a little bit about this last week, and I explained to you he was born free, though they thought he was born a slave. And then he was a musician. He learned songs from former slaves in Texas, and he would go on to sing these songs through the 1800s and the early 1900s. I think he was interviewed and recorded in 1935, and that particular song was "Mean Old Slavery Days," which he would more than likely have learned that from an ex-slave. Now, here's where it gets sticky, because I already told you that his parents escaped slavery through the Underground Railroad, goes to Michigan, goes to Canada, come back. I believe he's born in Michigan, and then his life kind of starts. But the reason why this is important, because Elijah Cox was actually a Buffalo Soldier, and where he ends up living his life, and he does not want to get back into the military anymore. So he and his son stay there and they perform, right, in St. Angelo, Texas. Why is that important to this story? Because that I'm going to ask you all to put it in the chat. What is the relationship between Buffalo Soldiers and the blues people, Black indigenous? I'll wait. Go through my notes, and I'll tell you what work songs are too. What's the difference? What's the connection? Why is being a Buffalo Soldier important to this story, and him not wanting to be one, though he stayed on the base? Y'all don't know? I know you know. Buffalo Soldiers were employed to remove and prevent indigenous blues people from reacquiring their land. Talk about black on black crime. So now this gentleman, I can't tell you, and the reason why I say I can't tell you, because exactly, that's my point. He knew who he was. So what he ended up doing was becoming a repository of these traditional slave seculars. And if you listen to the style and how he played it, you would hear that is the precursor to the blues, the acoustic blues. Okay? So now we're going to get into work songs. And that's why I showed this picture initially, which I'll play the song for you. But I want to tell you what some of these things are before I play you any more examples, okay? Work songs used to coordinate physical labor such as planting, harvesting, or construction work. Ultimately, agrarian work, farming. Have you ever heard of the term hand? Right? Now, if you really want to be technical and specific, the work song is an offspring of the slave secular rather than a type of slave secular. The work song is a offspring of the slave secular rather than a type of slave secular. The reason why it is a offspring rather than a type is for the simple fact once emancipation comes, and then we get into a situation where instead of working and singing in unison, it is more isolated work. It is more field hand work. It is more sharecropper work. This idea of corn shucking, this idea of singing in unison doesn't go to the wayside, but another thing happens. The individual is singing, that's working, right? Excuse me, y'all. The individual is singing, right? The individual to keep themselves in rhythm and things of this nature, because the work flow has changed to a degree, because what happens is the work song on the trains, on the levees, in these different spaces carries on the tradition of the slave secular, right? Corn shucking carries on the tradition of the slave secular. But, and I'm moving a little bit ahead, but I just want you to understand these things. At this time, the blues as individual voice, individual instrumentation popularizes. Okay, so I want to give you guys an example of a work song. Okay, now in 1939, on the Southern recording trip, John Lomax, and so many people are upset with the Lomaxes. We're not going to do that right now. Let's stick to what we're discussing, okay? Because, you know, I have to say, a lot of these anthropologists and archaeologists, some not intentionally, but some, I have to believe, intentional, especially if you know who Plecker is, reclassified, reframed the blues people narrative. Those that their lineage goes back to when Mississippi, Louisiana, Florida, Alabama, these spaces, Oklahoma were 100% Indian territory, but we'll get back into that another time. In 1939, Southern recording trip, on a Southern recording trip, and I've taken these trips with my family, right? And that's why I don't knock the Lomaxes as well. What I don't knock, that's right, Walter Peckler. Thank you for giving me his proper name. So, like the Lomaxes, my family comes out with me, and we collect and interview a lot of people, you know. But on this trip in 1939, John Lomax documented a wealth of folk music traditions. Okay, and one of the moments that I want to discuss is this gentleman and his family right here. As you can see, he's plowing the mule. Okay. Henry Truvillian, I think Truvillian. I hope I'm not tearing this guy's name up. So we're just gonna call him Mr. Henry, out of respect. Mr. Henry, that's his wife, and those are 4 of his kids, if I'm not mistaken. He had, I think, and if anybody's watching or listening that knows correct me if I'm wrong, whether it's in the theater or wherever. I believe he had 13 kids. But what ultimately happens now, mind you, Mr. Henry and his family lives and between the swamps of Texas and Louisiana. And he was a leader of the railroad work gang in the Sabine River swamp. Okay? So he used chant-like work songs to guide his crew's labor. Before I get to playing this and before I even continue discussing this story and how we get to this and then why this song is important to the idea of work songs and slave seculars and that space, another standout moment is the idea that the term chant like work songs. We already know it's rhythmic, but why chant like work songs is significant? Because again, that goes back to the sacred belief system, or better yet, the sacred practice. Whose sacred practice? Because you know, somebody will say, this family comes from somewhere else. So now, I want y'all to hear. I want y'all to hear Mr. Henry.
Cold in the heaven, I'll answer to my name, brother. When the roll be called in the heaven, I'll answer to my name. When I get to heaven, God knows I'm gonna walk. When I get to heaven, God knows I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna argue with the Father, I'm gonna chat with the Son. I'm gonna talk about the world that I just come from. When the roll be called in the heaven, I'll answer to my name, brother. When the roll be called in the heaven, I'll answer to my name. Well, I look way yonder in the middle of the sky, the great Jehovah come pass and by. Well, look way yonder in the middle of the air. Now, don't call the roll until I get there. When the roll be called in the heaven, I'll answer to my name, brother. When the roll be called in the heaven, I'll answer to my name. Well, he sits so high and he looks so low. He knows what the people has to undergo.
I didn't even want to stop the song. So I got some questions to ask y'all before we keep going on. What did you hear? What did you hear? And drop it in the comments. What did you hear? Okay? What did you hear? Stylistically, verbally, contextually, what did you hear? I don't want to give it all to you. I want this to be an interactive conversation. What did you hear? Because we're gonna be, I got a couple of other examples that I cannot wait to share, but I need to know, what did you hear there? Because it's very important. Now, we spoke about the chant-like phrase, vocal phrasing, right? Oh, why but away, I'm gonna put it away. You know, I didn't have any words in my head, but that sound, you know, people could say whatever they want. That's a specific blues people, Southern American blues people sound. granddaddy, grandmama, if you know about worship, right? That's how they sound. So Mr. Henry was talking about work conditions, intensive labor situations. He was talking about migration. He was talking about on the road, talk about resistance. He was speaking, he was giving us a story. But in that story, that rhythm is keeping him and his men's working in that space, keeping them working in unison, in rhythm. And again, this is the offspring, the offshoots of the slave secular, of the corn shucking, which corn shucking also is a part of slave seculars, right? We're going to get to corn shucking too, but first I want to get to field hollers. Because, you know, field hollers, which kind of, as a, I guess stylistically, I guess vocal phrasing wise, encapsulates all of this. Because the field holler is where you get the idea, or it's not where you get it, but it's where you can actually begin to pinpoint the call and respond. Field holler, the work song, they all kind of, they really kind of have similar functions with similar flows, right? So I want to go into one of Bessie Jones' pieces so you guys can understand, okay? Check this out. Well, I guess it's not playing. I don't know why. Come on, Bessie. I may have brought up the wrong one. We're going to try. I don't know why Bessie ain't playing. Let's remove Bessie. That one. I'll play another Bessie for you right now. I didn't want to play this one now, but I guess I don't have a choice. All right? I guess I don't have a choice.
Bible story the way the slaves told it in mythical poetic terms, from Genesis to Revelations. John Davis, Georgia C. Allen Singers.
We know that in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and God saw the light, that the light was good. Sister Jones going to tell you about it.
Once there wasn't no sun.
Oh,
Lord, once there wasn't no sun. Lord, once there wasn't no sun. Lord, I heard the angels singing. Oh, dear Lord, go down. Oh, dear Lord, go down. They were singing, dear Lord, go down. And Lord, I heard the angels singing. Oh, once there wasn't no moon. Lord, wasn't no man. Lord, there wasn't no man. You know, there wasn't no man. Lord, I heard angels singing. Oh, this sad old world. They saw this sad old world. Now the preacher said, this sad old world. Lord, I heard angels singing. Thank you.
So I figured out what happened with old Bessie. The first one I wanted to play for y'all. So I'm gonna play this for y'all. I'm gonna try one more time.
Anywhere that's been with the buzzer low, and it says throw me anywhere.
So sorry, I'm taking it to the back because I think it's very important for what I'm sharing with you guys to hear, because Bessie Jones, when we break down work songs, field hollers, corn shucking and dancing, playing and game songs, as well as protest songs, Bessie Jones is the quintessential embodiment, vessel of these blues people expressions. Ironically, she's Gullah. She comes out the Gullah region. Again, there's another, how do I want to word this? Because I don't want to say it's a discrepancy. I never want to come across and tell someone, that's one of the problems, and this is why I'm doing this, right? I don't think anybody should tell anybody who they are. If your family, if your lineage dictates, informs who you are and where you're from, how can someone come up to you and say, no, you're not from America, you're from Africa, or no, you're not from Africa, you're from America, or no, you're not from here, you're from there. It doesn't work that way, right? So I don't want to say misinformation, but what I will say is it gets convoluted in the space of the Gullah, because there's a lot of melanated culture there, Black Indian culture and African culture. Okay. Now, with that being said, Bessie Jones embodies blues people culture, Black American culture, okay, through her songs. As a teacher, I would say she's a folklorist. I would say she's an ethnomusicologist, for those of you that understand the technical academic terms. For those of you who don't care, what I would say is she is a culture and tradition bearer. She is a holder of the scroll. She is a vessel of traditional Black American expression. Okay, do you understand? But see, that's my folk right there. I appreciate you. So let's hear Bessie.
How you say things with song. Remember?
How you say things with song?
Remember you were telling me about how you can say things in songs that you can't say.
Oh, of course, that's right. How people does say things through song that they want to say with the talk what they said through a song. So that's what I was telling you before. I like that old feel, and I tell you about throw me anywhere. That's been with the buzzer low, and it says throw me anywhere in that old field, because they knew that's what they were going to do with them. When they died, didn't bury people as good as they do now. Of course,
Who?
The slaves, of course, and this Facebook and came out and throw them in the old field. That's what they call it, because they didn't figure that they was they didn't call it the graveyard, so they just tell them they didn't care how to do them. Just since Jesus loved them, you see. So this way the buzz don't come in there.
What about Jesus in the field?
Well, Jesus, he was buried in the field of Golgotha. You see, that's why they call it the old field. See, Jesus was buried in the field of Golgotha, and that's you find that in the Bible. That's why he was buried out in the field of Golgotha, and that's why the old people call it the old field until they come up in the more different things. We call it different things, and they tell them. And then in this old field, speaking of this old field, they would say what they want to say about how they were treated and everything, and they added that in the song. That's why the brother coming in. He said, like the brother coming in, he said, throw me anywhere, Lord, in that old field. Throw me anywhere, Lord, in that old field. Don't care how you do me in that old field. Since King Jesus choose me in that old field. You may beat and bang me in that old field. Since King Jesus saved me in that old field. Throw me anywhere, Lord, in that old field. Throw me anywhere, Lord, in that old field. Don't care how you treat me in that old field. Since King Jesus meet me in that old field.
So you got a sense of, and I'm gonna play a couple more things. And you can also go to the YouTube page, and let me just be clear so you guys can see. You can go to any one of these down here, okay? And access the episode I did about the Georgia Sea Island recording. All right. Fred McDowell's in it. It was a live performance recording that came at the Smithsonian, put it out. Great album, great record, and good history. And yes, Alan Lomax and Pete was part of it. Pete recorded it. Good brother Eric, who is a Dr. Eric Crawford, who is a Bessie Jones and Gullah expert, and a couple of other people wrote the liners, and they were on the show with me, and we discussed that record in detail. And I'm gonna play a couple of more, maybe one more, but if you want to hear more about it and how to get it, that would be the episode to watch. But the point I'm making is what I'm trying to get you all to see is how from the slave seculars come the work songs, come the field house, come corn shucking and dance songs. And dance songs are also called frolicking, right? So I there's some ideas that I need you all to understand when we're discussing this, right? And I guess this is kind of turned into a class, so to speak, and please forgive me for that. But I find this extremely significant when it comes to the story of the Black folk narrative, the blues people, when it comes to the story of the music and understanding how this music drives forward I just turned up the mic. I hope all this time you heard me well. How this music, the blues, is our oral history, and where it comes from and how it becomes in the morphing and the messaging. Because some folk, James Cone right there, Leroy Jones and a few others, Leroy Jones specifically, I believe, said that the blues is a direct descendant of slave seculars out of its rebelliousness. Now, John Wesley Work, wait a minute. Where's my John Wesley Work picture? We got an issue here. Again, if y'all been following me for some time, you know that I revere John Wesley work. And I know, okay, here we go. I'll put this picture up in a minute. Okay. But so, first of all, if you know who James H. Cohen is, please just bear with me, okay? But I just want to make sure those who are just tapping in, those who did not tap in live and come back later and listen, and I'm saying these names, I want you to know who these people are, okay? I appreciate you. James H. Cohen, now he's a theologian. I believe I told you that, but he's a theologian. And he actually wrote a book, which is back here on my shelf. I almost got up to get it because I know where it is. I'm looking right at Black Theology, where he's discussing how the blues people connects to Hebrew scriptures and why, and how that informs our existence in a space of imprisonment as well as the fight for liberation. And he does a great job laying that out. That's just one of the many things that he's written about, right? But what I want to focus on is one of the many books he has that's my favorite, The Spirituals and the Blues, an interpretation. And he gives very timely information and insight into the relationship between slave seculars, spirituals, and the blues. Okay? Now, he emphasizes that slave seculars were important. It was a counterpart to the spirituals, representing everyday non-religious struggles. So, man, I did say it was Leroy Jones. It might have been, as I think about it. But anyway, what Combs is doing right here is making a direct connection between the slave secular and the blues, because the blues, by definition, is non-religious. It is sacred. It does speak about folk belief when it talks about hoodoo, but see, here's the difference. People get hoodoo and voodoo mixed up. Voodoo is a religious practice. Hoodoo is a culture. Now, I can cite people who shared this with me, as well as the books that I've read that share this, right? And I have to be clear about this, because I wouldn't say I'm an expert in hoodoo. I would say what I found is the Pentecostal practice that I grew up understanding resembles the culture because it comes from the South. And to be clear, it doesn't resemble the culture because it comes from the South. It resembles the culture because it comes from the South. So now I set it up that way so you understand. When Cone says slave seculars are counterpart to spirituals representing the everyday non-religious struggles, he's ultimately speaking to, or he's speaking in correlation with John Wesley work, who makes a clear distinction between the people and the music of the church, or as he calls the cloth, and the people of the blues, which he too refers to the blues as daily non-spiritual issues. And when I say non-spiritual, because that's not the term he used, I'm using that term loosely, if you will, because non-spiritual in this moment means non-religious practice, or as John Wesley Work would say, having not to do with the praise of the Lord or Jesus Yahushua. Okay? So it's based on earthly issues, whether they're desires, worldly issues, okay? Whether it's hurt or angst. But in some cases, because for me, the blues is extremely spiritual and sacred. As a performance, as a listener, as a vessel and a conduit, as a practitioner, it is extremely sacred to me. Right? So now, I'm also of the mindset that the blues is humanities. Humanities discusses, raises awareness, brings attention to the human condition. Well, slave seculars brings awareness to human condition. The spirituals, the black spirituals, bring awareness to the human condition. Work songs, prison songs, which we haven't gotten to, and maybe I'll try to find one and upload it to share it with you. Prison songs. These are all songs. Okay, let's go back, right? Prison songs, work songs, slave seculars, black spirituals, blues, field hollers, even corn shucking. These are songs depicting human conditions, sometimes in the moment. So when we think about, well, let's go back to the comments. How many people are familiar? One for yes, two for no. How many of y'all are familiar with freestyle? The concept of freestyle off the top of the head when it comes to rap. I'll give it a couple of seconds before I go into it. But when it comes to rap, how many of you all are familiar with off the top of the dome, off the top of the head freestyle? Or the concept of freestyle? Because if you really understand, freestyle and off the top of the head are not necessarily synonymous. Okay, that's one. Cool. Give it a couple more seconds. Off the top of the head, off the dome, as they say. Particularly if you were here when I played Mr. Henry's song, right? Okay, so the reason why that's important, during corn shucking, and this is what I didn't get to yet, but we can get to right now. And one of the reasons I really love James Cone's scholarship, Edward Baptiste talks about this in his book, The Half Has Never Been Told. This is a very, very good book, okay? It's almost like, I think it's right here on my desk, Capitalism and Slavery. But what The Half Has Never Been Told goes into, and this is, I don't know if this is what Baptiste was really trying to do, but he kind of, how can I say, hold on, I got to look at y'all for this part of the conversation, and then I'll get back to this image. I don't know if Baptiste was doing this on purpose, and I don't know if anyone else received this information, but what I received from it, it kind of, at least for me, confirms that people here on the Americas, not from anywhere else, made up quite a portion of the slaves, because what Baptiste was discussing was, he sets up, you know, the idea of international slavery. Then he goes into how that stops international slavery. But he also says that there were still people coming from Haiti to Cuba to New Orleans, Louisiana. But with those people coming from there, one of the interesting points he was making was the fact that it was the domestic slave trade that changed the game, if you will. And why is that an issue? Because then you have to wonder because, you know, if you look at the numbers, at least just what Baptiste was saying, I'm not even going to give you my theory because that's not what's important right now. But if you look at the numbers, it doesn't really make sense. The not so large percentage of melanated people from across to another continent, and then when you look at how these things kind of play out, you know what I'm saying? What I'm inferring, right? So he actually kind of lays out, you know, and people, you know, for whatever reason, people like to push the narrative. Well, you know, the indigenous allowed Africans to come into their tribe or their reservation or their land to run away from these slave traders or plantations. And, you know, I guess what the issue is for me as an avid reader and a glutton for information, if you look at timelines, that doesn't make sense, because at the time they're saying this was happening, indigenous folk was getting treaty broke after treaty broke. So where were they running to if they weren't already swarthy or mahogany? But anyway, I digress. I like to throw that in every so often, right? I like to throw that in every so often, right? But we're going to get back to exactly. We're going to get back to Baptiste. Okay? We're going to get back to Baptiste because Edward E. Baptiste, in his book, The Half Has Never Been Told, Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism, that part, he discussed corn shucking. He also discussed other communal celebrations in the context of blues people that are enslaved, imprisoned, right? However, one of the things that he says when he discusses corn shucking, which I find interesting. So first, this is a game. This is a competition between plantations, if you will. Also, The Half Has Never Been Told introduces us to the Georgia man. Okay? Write that down, Georgia man, look it up, or just read the book. I believe All God's Children speaks of the Georgia man too, if I'm not mistaken. Right? But I wish I could answer that question. Because the story is enslaved Africans ran to Indian tribes to become free. That's what a lot of people keep repeating. But if you look at the timeline, indigenous tribes were fighting treaty break after treaty break. So it's a little weird for me, right? But let's also discuss where corn comes from, right? Mr. Wonderful comes with something totally left field. I don't want to say left field. That's not fair, right? You're bringing something to the conversation, and I appreciate that, Mr. Wonderful. But we know, where corn comes from. But here's some interesting things about this idea of the corn shucking conversation and why. Oh, you thought I forgot. I hope you're still here, Mr. Trayvon Smith. Why I asked if you're familiar with Off the Top of the Dome and freestyling and how this has to do with work songs, prison songs, blues, all the way down to hip hop. So the half has never been told talks to us about frolicking, and it talks to us about these plantations coming together to have and frolicking, if you're unfamiliar, is when the imprisoned free labored workers are allowed space to socialize, go see their chick, go see their dude. Okay? And so what happens is a lot of times these folk are within, well, I don't say a lot of times, but there are moments, there are times that these folk are within 3 and 4 plantations are within the same area. And you know what? My brother, Mr. Walter, said, follow the music. So I can corroborate the fact that a lot of these plantations were in proximity and that people were going and frolicking with each other on these different plantations. Because if you go back and you start from the timeline of Reuben Lacey and those folk down to Robert Johnson, so you'll be seeing Rube Lacey, Charlie Patton, Sunhouse, Willie Brown, Howler Wolf. I'm trying to remember the brother's name on the harmonica. I can't think of his name right now. And Papa Staples. These folk were going from Dockery to this one to that one. They're on Stovall. They was on, they whatever, they were going between plantations to perform. So if they were going between plantations to perform, they're in close proximity. If they're in close proximity, when we're talking about corn shucking, one plantation first, the next plantation. So the I guess the massa, if you will, exactly. They sit back, 2 of them, with their men's on the porch, and then they let the Negroes, and if you knew what Negro really meant, you may think twice about thinking of that as an insult if you are, in fact, indigenous to the Americas. Now, getting back to corn shucking and dancing. Now, mind you, this is depicted in The Half Has Never Been Told. This is why I have that book cover here for you. Okay? One plantation versus the next. So now, just like work songs, which I played you Mr. Henry giving an example. They choose the person with the best voice who commands the crowd. What does that sound like? And who could go off the top of their head and create creative and dynamic lyrics in the moment. Well, doesn't that sound like an MC? So what happens is while they're shucking the corn, not shucking and jiving, but there is a connect. We're not going to talk about that right now. They're shucking the corn to the leader, like Mr. Henry, of the corn shucking team. Rhythmic communication. His song off the top of the head. His field holler, his work song, his slave secular. All these things make the blues, but you know what we haven't really spoke about, and we'll probably speak about that. I'm thinking about speaking about that next week because we're speaking about a lot of secular, remember, slave secular. You know what the word secular means. So this episode really is about the secular side of blues people expression. We mentioned spirituals, hymns, right? Hoot and hollering. It is more about the secular side. And when it comes to the secular side, this is why, now again, the half has never been told gives us a detailed example of how one of these things play out and how they look, corn shucking. And then what happens is the win. I know I was about to say something, but I want to close that point before I move on. The winner gets some corn liquor. Then they all get, now all these Negroes get to go to the next plantation or wherever they're frolicking. A lot of times it's in the woods. Y'all know about the Hush Harbor and the things of this nature. Because you know, they get to go and frolic with their ladies. Absolutely. See, that's such a long name. I don't even know what to call you. You gotta let me know what to call you because I can't say that whole long name every time. I'm sorry. You gotta let me know what to call you. But for those of you who've been following me for some time, you know that my one of my lessons, and you can see that one here or on AfricanAmericanFolklorists.com or YouTube page, or this one. Hip hop is the great grandchild of the blues. Now, most of my grandparents, 3 of them were born between 1916 and 1921, and then one of them was born about 2730. So the reason why I say great 3 greats, because my grandparents were born right when they were about to start recording the blues. Okay? So their parents, let's just, I know the answer to this, but I'm just going to be easy, not give too much. Let's say my great grandparents was between 17 and 25 when they had my grandparents. That would make them born between 1890 and 1900, right? Which would make their parents possibly born about 1865, 1870. and their parents would be my 3-time grandparents, great, great, great. So the blues as we know it is getting established where they're saying emancipation happens, is where I'm getting to. God is Bobby Brutus. So that's why I say 3 times great, because emancipation is where where we're kind of saying blues as we know it. Even though we know a lot of these men and women were singing 100, 200, 300-year-old songs, blues as we know it begins to be established around the Civil War era. Okay? Also, the migration, though we're always told it starts between 1914 and 1920, that's the first migration. Then the second migration is about 44 to 50. Excuse me. Then the third migration is considered in the early 70s. We all know that and I don't want to say the earliest migration, but the migration for the Americas that we're discussing, because America changes during the Civil War. It changes during the Revolutionary War, but then again, and remember, New Orleans is established. Mississippi wasn't. Mississippi comes in 1799, 1803. Prior to that, it's Indian territory. But if I'm not mistaken, New Orleans was already a city. These things are very significant to the story of, it's very significant to the story of Black folklore, blues people transmission, material art, intangible culture. So our expression, how we are informed and how we know the blues, how we are informed, how we know slave seculars, and everything in between that we're discussing. I hope this is making sense to you. So even Frederick Douglass speaks about slave seculars, and he discusses the role of slave songs in both spirituals and what's considered secular songs during his time. He never really used the term slave seculars together as the descriptive term or a title for it. Okay? But he had what did he attribute? Because to him, and I would imagine he informed, and when I say informed, I don't know if he spoke specifically to I doubt he spoke to W.B. Du Bois. I don't know. But what I would, I like the fact that you understand the difference between immigrants with an I and immigrants with an M. Some of the etymology is a mon. Because if you understand the difference between immigrants with an I and immigrants with an E, M, I think I said M before. If you understand the difference between the two, then you understand how we went from Negro, indigenous to colored to Black to African American and all these other names. You understand what I'm saying? However, Frederick Douglass looks at slave songs, sorrow songs, with the desire for freedom. And I find that important because That informs our dear W.E.B. Du Bois, who just coins his sorrow songs and then lays out what a sorrow song is. Okay? So, work songs, corn shucking, field hollers, dance song, games, and the like. I dig it. I dig it. I dig it, Bo B. Oh, we gotta put this up because they, well, here's the thing. And follow the music, follow the blues. It's right there. Right? So, man, we're running out of time because I kind of wanted to go into protest songs and how some of these songs, and when I say protest songs, maybe I'll do that another time, right? Because hold on, let me look at my peoples. There's a few more things that I wanted to touch on, but we may have to make this a part 2. Now, this is all kind of serial, how I'm doing this, but it's not necessarily a part 1 or part 2. They just all connect to blues, black folklore, blues peoples, things, things like this. But it's I don't want to hold y'all for another hour and a half, another 90 minutes. So what I'm gonna do is, and by the way, for those of you rocking with me, just understand every Sunday at between 9 and 9:30 Central Time, we're gonna have this conversation together. Remember, I appreciate Bobby saying that, the y'all are coming to class because I guess this is what this is. But just like any the way the class is supposed to be, is an interactive build. You know what I'm saying? It's an interactive build. Oh, let me tell y'all before I forget. March 1st, Saturday morning, we're having a master class. All right. Let me get this information to y'all real quick. So I'm going to probably be looking a little crazy, only because I need to find this so I could put it up so y'all can make sure. Here we go. Let me just download this real quick, and then I'm gonna share it with you all. If it downloads correctly, you know what? I know what to do. Oh, it's taking a long time to download. It shouldn't take that long, but it's all right. I know what to do because this is something I want y'all to know about. Okay, here we go. Now it wants to work. I ain't gonna be mad at you though. Nope, that's the wrong place. File management is another thing that's really, really, really important, and archiving and things of that nature. And we're going to have a master class on that one as well. You said a master class. What are you talking about? I just want one image, and it seems like can I upload? Okay, I can't upload images that way. So I'll upload the image this way. Let's see. Is it in here? Here we go. Okay. I'm gonna try not to look crazy with this, but I can't promise. Okay, so master class. Locating Tribal Ancestry, March 1st, 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Central Time. It's going to be online. Please, we have a Eventbrite where you can get tickets. It's $10 a ticket. We have the Honorable Miss Phoenix Moon. We have Dr. Nolan Fontaine and Mr. Ishmael Bey. We also have an issue because Mrs. Moon's name is spelled incorrectly. I have to fix that immediately. The time and effort and work she puts in, she deserves her name to be spelled right. Forgive me, Miss Moon. The purpose of this masterclass is to be informed how to connect and reconnect families to the ancestral and tribal family tree history, as well as land. Because once you connect to your people, you connect to your land. Now, here's the thing that I have to be clear about. They don't even do it individually. This genealogy is not even done individually anymore, but it's done in family settings. Okay? So tap into that. You can I could put it in, you know what? I could put it in the feed. I'll put it in the feed right now. Yeah, I'll put up my email as well. That's not a problem. But first, let me put up, I'm going to look crazy again, but let me just find this Eventbrite. And I'll put this in the feed. We're coming to a close. But I just want to make sure I give y'all the information that is necessary. All right. Because again, the blues is oral and oral history. Okay? Story, narrative. Our story, narrative. But those that came to America, those that live in America, regardless of your connection or whatever ethnicity, tribe, or what have you, y'all informed the blues too, because the blues was our response to our treatment, good, bad, or indifferent, if that makes any sense. And this is what we're talking about. Right? Okay. Now, Miss Moon, forgive me. I'm going to fix that. If y'all want to... Okay. Yes, Chief Warhorse, you know, I almost want, I want to, well, I don't almost, I want to say that's my chief. So next week we're going to finish this conversation. Hopefully, if we can't finish it in the 90 minutes time slot, I will be moving on. And the way I'll do it is because we have to also get to the spirituals and why the spirituals, the hymnals, how that informs the blues, how the seculars and the forms of song that intertwine with a particular type of spiritual, because there's more than one spiritual, right? And when I say more than one style of spiritual. And the reason why that's significant is because one style of spiritual hymnals are sang for a particular purpose, while the other style and form is not only just saying for a particular belief, but it has to do with class and the different the different things that affect community. And forgive me, I know I keep saying I don't. I'm trying not to use the term community so much because I feel like it's ambiguous. It's extremely general, but sometimes it does fit. Thank you, S. Dot. All right. So look here, good folk. We're gonna come back tomorrow. Finish this conversation. So I'll be deeming it. I'll be coining it from slave seculars to the blues, preserve it, blah blah blah. Part 2. We're gonna go in a little bit more. As usual, add some of those nuggets that are necessary. And remember, between 9 p.m. and 9:30 is when I'll be going live Central Time. If anything happens to change for whatever reason, I will let y'all know. But from what I've said from day one, when you come here, y'all gonna learn them blues. I'm going to leave playing Levy Can't Moan. Wait, I just have to. This is how Sun House looks. Okay, that's who informs my blues. Okay, in terms of stylistically and musicianship. Reason why I show you him because he has a version of Levy Can't Holler, right? And quite a few of them. And we're going to talk about stuff like that too. Make sure you jump to my Patreon so you can catch up with the Jack Dapper Blues Reflexive podcast, where it's not like this where we discuss the topics like this, but I share with you how I go about doing these public programmings and where I dropped the ball, where I could do better, and things like this. And also my blues blog. I'm contemplating how I'll make that available in the future. But as of now, you need to be a Patreon to access that. All right. So I'm gonna pull out with this one. And yeah, I thank y'all for rocking with me. I will see y'all next week.
Oh, Lord, I woke up this morning, man, I was feeling bad. Whoa, babe, I was feeling bad. Well, I was thinking about the good time, Lord, I once have had.